Hello, viewers. Are you interested in extracting more? Yes, this is a filtering and diluting makgeolli brewing experiment. Normally, I leave my brew undiluted, and if I want to add water, I add it just before drinking. Traditionally, however, the water is added during filtering. So that's what you'll see today. The goal is to extract a little more makgeolli and maybe affect the flavor too. This channel is dedicated to rustic Asian rice wine. For me, the best thing is when I hear that someone new is brewing and enjoying rice wine. So I'd like to thank all my viewers for spreading the word. Keep it up. Happy brewing. Here's what you'll get in this video. You'll see two-stage makgeolli brews. You'll see me learn a lesson about the match test. And you'll see filtering using water for additional extraction. So let's brew. Although I'll be following one of my standard recipes today, I will be making a few variations. So to start off with, I'm boiling 1.5 liters of water. I really only need 1.2 liters of water, but of course some of this water will evaporate as it's boiling. So can you guess the method I'm going to be using today? I have rice powder, salgaru. This is regular rice powder, not sweet rice powder. And I'm boiling water, so you know that I'm making bambak. So I'm pouring boiling water into rice flour. That makes a porridge called bambak. So pour a small amount at a time and stir and mix it in as well as you can. And keep on doing that. And you'll make bambak. And the ratio of rice flour to water is about 1 to 3. So I have 400 grams of rice flour and 1.2 liters of water, and I'm using the scale to measure the amount of water that I'm adding. So it's a fairly loose porridge. It's cooked partially, at least, by the boiling water. So we let this cool to room temperature, and I'm going to measure the NURUK. This is the crucial ingredient for making makgeolli. I'm using 220 grams of NURUK. That's a little bit more than normal because this is a bit old. And what I'm doing different today is I'm adding that NURUK directly into the bambak. Normally I mix the NURUK with water first. But today I just dumped it right in, and I'm going to try to mix it into the bambak as best I can. And it's worth spending time doing this. The more you do this, the more liquid the bambak is going to get. It's going to be easier to pour into the jar later. And of course, it is important to cool down the bambak before adding the NURUK. If you don't do that, the enzymes in the NURUK could be neutralized by the high temperatures. That's why the cooling down period is very important. So I stirred that for about 15 minutes. It's liquid enough. It can always be stirred more. And I'm dividing this between 2 jars. Again, I'm using the scale to keep things equal. And now for one of these jars, I'm going to add some yeast. So for jar A, I leave it alone, and for jar B, I'm adding half a teaspoon of wine yeast. And I keep usually I would add the yeast to water. This time I just dumped the yeast in and stirred it a bit. And keep the lids loose to allow oxygen in and carbon dioxide out. Ferment in a dark place around 20 degrees Celsius. So the next day, They look about the same. This is just 12 hours later. Some bubbles formed. From above, they look a little bit different in terms of the amount of bubbles. Let's stir this twice a day for the first 2 days. That's my plan. It is quite soft. Now jar B. So the texture is a bit different between A and B because of the presence of yeast, or the wine yeast in jar B. So the next day, let's keep observing any differences. So jar B actually has separated into 2 layers already. Jar A has more bubbles on the top and is uniform, and jar B has 2 layers and fewer bubbles. So again, stir this. Now, since the temperatures are relatively cool, I'm going to wait till day 3 before proceeding to the next stage. So the activity has slowed down a lot. A is more frothy and B has separated. So today is when I'm going to make the godubop and proceed to the next stage. Yes, it's time to make godubop with chopped sal, sweet rice. So I'm weighing 1.6 kilograms of sweet rice, chopped sal. Wash that gently for about 15 minutes. I do try to show all the steps I go through when making makgeolli. I think it's important for you to see everything that I do. I wash rice every time. It's a routine thing. It takes some time to do. Washing rice is part of the process. It's one of the things I like about the process of brewing rustic Asian rice wine. You know, you do it with your hands. You're actually making something with your hands. I like that part of it. It's something different than the rest of my day. I get to actually create something. Something grows because of my efforts. So I do like that part of it. So as you're washing the rice, think about the delicious rice wine you're going to be drinking later. Think about all the people that have been washing rice over the ages to make rice wine. By doing this, you're a part of that tradition. No use doing it for more than 15 minutes. It does need to soak for at least 3 hours. So make sure it's covered when it's soaking. And after it's soaked, drain all the water and do a final rinse of the rice. Let it drain for 30 minutes. And we'll get the steamer ready. Put the water in the bottom of the steamer. Steaming tray, wet cloth, and get the water boiling. Looks ready. Put all the soaked rice in, and watch out for the steam, of course. Move the rice to the edge. If the rice is deep, poke some holes in to let the steam through. And after you see the steam escaping, start timing. Steam it for 40 minutes. It looks good. So this is hard steamed rice. It'll be a little firm. And we're going to spread it out to cool and dry off a bit. And after 15 minutes, I like to turn it over to help it cool down evenly. Don't always show this part, but I do always do this. And then I use the scale to divide it into parts for each jar. So it's the equivalent of starting off with 800 grams of chopped sal for each jar. So I'm stirring jar A before I add in the godubop. and I add 500 milliliters of water. Now, that's to give an overall ratio of about 1-to-1 rice to water. And same with B. Stir it, same amount of rice, starting with 800 grams of raw rice and soaking and steaming it, adding it to jar B, mixing by hand. There we go. And then back in the basement to ferment. And this time I'm going to put it on a cardboard platform there. That'll avoid the cold floor. The floor might be too cold, so I don't want to rest the jars directly on the floor. So here's recipe summary. These are the 2 jars, A and B. On day 0, I made bombach with rice flour, water, and added NURUK to both of them, and wine yeast only to jar B. And then on day 3, I made the godubab, 800 grams of rice and 500 milliliters of water for each jar. So that's the summary of these two-stage brews. And 2-stage makgeolli is called Yeongju. So we have 2 Yeongjus, and let's see how they turn out with my plan to extract additional makgeolli at the end using water. So let's see what happens. So on day 4, the 2 jars look pretty similar, but the top of jar A, it looks a bit dry, like there's some kind of dry film on top. B looks wetter. I don't like that, so I'm going to stir jar A. Just the top part, just to avoid any mold growing on the top. I want to avoid that. And the next day, day 5, again from the side they look pretty similar, separated into layers already. And A smells like apple and B smells more like grain. And on day 6, I see that jar B, some of the rice is falling down already, so it seems a little more advanced in the fermentation process. On the top, they look similar now. No more problem with that dry film. And day 7, that continues. Jar B is definitely ahead. So let's do the match test. Let's see if they're both still actively fermenting. So an A doesn't go out, and B definitely goes out. Okay, so the match stayed lit in jar A but went out in jar B. That means the fermentation is not very active in A right now. But I hear bubbles in both jars, so I'm going to let both jars continue fermenting. And day 8, yeah, you can really see that jar B is ahead, but some rice is falling in jar A. And now when I do the match test, jar A goes out, jar B doesn't go out. So that's the match test for you. I got the opposite result. Match went out in jar A and stayed lit in jar B. I think the lesson that I get here is that the match test is easy to do, but not definitive. You still need to listen and observe your brew. I'm still hearing it bubbling. Now, jar B is very uniform. And the match goes out in A, and it also goes out in B. I see day 10, it's more rice has fallen in jar A. Match is still going out in A, it's not going out in B. Day 11, I see that, okay, now jar B is so uniform. Match is going out in A, not going out in B. Well, that's 2 days, and also it looks so uniform. I'm going to filter and bottle jar B today. So I foil the filter bag. Also, I can see some of the liquid has really risen to the top of jar B, so it's really ready. Time to filter. So this is what, so So I'm starting off the same as normal, but there's some residue in the jar here. I'm going to get that residue. So I'm going to add water as I'm filtering anyhow. I might as well start adding the water to the jar and get everything out of it. That's better. And as I'm squeezing, I'm extracting liquid. As I go along, I'm going to add more water and help extract, help clean off the chicken meat here and get everything out. So all the, I mostly have solids in the bag now. I'm pouring water on it and through it, hoping to get a little more out of it. More alcohol, more flavor filtered out of my brew here. So that's the idea. That's what I want to get. So I end up adding 1.5 liters of water as I'm filtering. And this is the jjigae. It was 252 grams, so that's pretty normal. That's good. I have more liquid, of course, since I added water. So make sure to stir it up, and I'm see how many bottles I get. I'm going to get basically 3.5 liters out of this. Okay, so that's what I wanted and expected out of this. I want to see if it affects the flavor. I've diluted with water as I'm filtering my makgeolli. Now the texture looks good. It wasn't hard to do, and I think I did get a little bit extra out of it. I'm going to taste it now, but of course I'm going to really do the taste test in a few days when I bottle the other one and can compare them. But this tastes normal to me. It's the flavor I've come to expect when I use wine yeast. But the other jar, which is still fermenting, I will compare later with this one. And just the next day, I see now the brew looks very uniform from the side. It's a lot quieter, and the match is not going out. I'm gonna bottle this one today. So just one day different. B was just one day ahead of jar A. So, like before, dump it out. Use a little water to clean out the jar. And time to squeeze. And I add some water as I go along. Try to get as much out of this as possible. Use the same amount of water, 1.5 liters. End up with pretty much the same amount of jjigae left over. And I'll bottle this one. As this was brewing, it definitely smelled more like apples, a little bit sour. That's also to be expected. I ended up with 3.5 liters of makgeolli made with no wine yeast, just the yeast from the NURUK. So we'll see how this tastes. And again, the texture is good. So it's easy to dilute with water as you're filtering. That's an easy thing to do, and get a nice looking makgeolli. This tastes, again, exactly like I expect for a brew with no additional wine yeast. I'm glad it fermented well. I had no problems with that, and it does taste different. And I will. So 3 days later, I'm doing the comparison side by side, and you can see that it settled nicely, both A and B. And I'm going to check the texture again, mix it up. For both of these, the texture of the sediment is nice and smooth. So let's talk about the advantages of diluting with water during filtration. There's more extraction and less waste. From what I've read, this is the more traditional way to dilute with water. And some people also mention that this does a better job of mixing the alcohol and water than doing it at the last minute right before you drink it. Now, I'm not noticing any difference in taste, whether you dilute it while filtering or just before drinking. The taste seems the same to me. There are some disadvantages of diluting with water during filtration. For one thing, your makgeolli won't keep as long due to the lower alcohol content. So keeping it undiluted, it will last longer in the fridge. Also, it's less flexible just because you can't go back to the undiluted form. So you're going to have to drink it more quickly, and it's for something that you're sure you're happy with it being diluted. But if what you want is diluted makgeolli, regular strength makgeolli, then this is a perfectly valid way to do it. If I don't do the whole batch this way, I might still do some of the filtering with additional water. So I might bottle some undiluted and dilute the rest. I appreciate you watching this entire video. Please let me know what you think. I enjoy answering your comments and questions. Thank you for watching.